Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this week's episode of The Contented Narrative, where we should be looking at Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. God, got it wrong in the first 2 seconds. So this book is of course written by J.K. Rowling and released in 1999. The consequential film was then released in 2004. Now, as usual, I will be discussing 4 things. I'll be discussing how good is the book, how good is the film, how well does the plot transcend from the book to the film, and overall how good is everything. Now obviously bear in mind that there are spoilers in this episode, as there are spoilers in every episode, so if you've neither read nor seen the book, if you've neither read nor seen the film, which I find a little hard to believe, do go ahead and go off and read it before you come over to ourselves. So first things first. Okay, so as we are well aware, I am a huge Harry Potter fan. Slytherin and proud, as you know, the little earrings are just suggesting. And in actuality, I know that the films do get a lot of backlash from a lot of people, and it starts to sort of like peter off, you know, in their own little narrative. But of course, I will always recommend a Harry Potter film. I adore the film franchise and I adore the book franchise. Now, obviously, you know, this film, the 3rd installment, is absolutely fantastic. I love the way that they sort of like introduce, you know, this Grim that's going to kill Harry. And then in actuality, a prediction that Ron makes was that you're going to suffer, but you're going to be happy about it, actually turns out to be spot on, because he finds that, you know, he suffers and everything, and he realises that he's still living with the Dursleys, but he's happy because he knows that he's got a godfather now out there. So it works. Also, this book and this film, I'm talking about the film first. This film is sort of like the only one really that doesn't have Voldemort in it. I mean, it has sort of like, you know, as in all the Harry Potter books, but this one he doesn't actually face off against Voldemort. You know, the face off, that, you know, the saving and the end of term and everything, nothing to do with Voldemort, to be perfectly honest, just to do with the little Peter Pettigrew, you know, little rat that he is. Now obviously this is the first time we come across the Dementors as well, and in the film, I mean, I know that they go through a few design changes later on, but they are brilliantly terrifying and they scare the living daylights out of me. I mean, like, this idea that this is a hooded creature that can just suck all the happiness out of you is just, I mean, that's not something you really want to deal with, is it? And you start to see the maturity of the 3 main characters, but also sort of like the immaturity. You see the bonds that they're starting to form, and the fact that, you know, obviously in the first film they were just getting to know each other. The second film, you know, they were facing off. 3rd film, they're sort of starting to see that camaraderie and that bonding, which I quite like. And obviously you see a competent Defence Against the Dark Arts teacher as well, which is a nice change. Now, of course, this is the first time we come across Sirius as well, and we're led to believe that he is this vicious killer. Turns out he's not, and I adore that. And I love how, like, the scene in the film where they're sort of like going through and it's like, I know when you want to kill me, you know, you killed my parents, and they're like, hang on a minute, who said we wanted to kill you? But like, you go back into like, he has to die, 12 years about, and you're like, if I was Harry, I'd be thinking they were talking about me as well. I will always recommend the Harry Potter films, and I love these films, and I can just sit and watch them with a bowl of cheese puffs, you know, a bottle of Schlur, just sat down relaxing, and I can watch them anywhere. So I will give this film a 10 out of 10. Now the book is always a good read. I love reading the Harry Potter books because they're sort of mature enough that you don't feel like you're reading children's novels, but at the same time, you know, they've still got that magical and that wonder to it. And I absolutely love that. The descriptions of the classes, you know, the descriptions of the Quidditch matches as well, the excitement you get for everything, and it's just, it makes you really want to go to Hogwarts, because obviously the first couple of books you don't really get, you know, an introduction and stuff, but these go into a lot of detail about the classes and everything, and I really like that, and I love how they do that. And obviously we then, you know, we get told in great description about Hogsmeade Village, which honestly, I can't wait to go. I want to go. Like, Hogsmeade Village seems like a very lovely place to be. So, you know, it's the only fully wizarding village as well, and it's always a pleasure to read. And, you know, it feels like a nice chapter in the Harry Potter story, because as I said, it's not really to do with him facing off Voldemort. And in the end, he saves 2 lives. And although, you know, Sirius doesn't get his, you know, exonerated for being innocent, he still saves Buckbeak and he still saves Sirius, and you know, and it's a nice feeling, because, you know, at the end of the books normally you're like, well, you defeated Voldemort, but he will be coming back, so don't take too much of a break. And then I do feel sorry for him about finding out about a godfather, thinking he's free of the Dursleys and realising he's not free of the Dursleys, because actually Sirius is still, well, considered guilty. So you know, I'll always recommend a Harry Potter book as well. I always feel like it's a good read. I can get this done in a day, 2 days tops, and you can just sit down and enjoy it. And, you know, just on a nice miserable day or on a nice sunny day, you can just sit down, and it's a book that you can take anywhere with you. So the book gets a 10 out of 10 for me. Okay, so the plot. Now, the film and the book both start with Harry doing the wizard homework under his covers at night, because obviously, you know, the Dursleys don't want anything to do with the wizarding kind. But in the book, he does get, his birthday does happen, which kind of, in the films, they kind of just like go over, like they don't really pay attention to. But yeah, so it happens in the book, and he gets letters and presents from his friends delivered by Hedwig. Now, you also find out about the Weasleys winning some money and going over to Egypt a lot quicker in the book. Like, you pretty much learn about it in the first chapter. In the film, it's not until he goes away to Diagon Alley and kind of runs away from home that you find that out. In both, we get Aunt Marge's visit, and Uncle Vernon saying if Harry is well behaved, he'll sign the Hogsmeade trip permission slip. So obviously, you know that no matter how well behaved Harry is, something is going to go wrong for him, because, you know, it's Harry. So basically, you know, Aunt Marge is a horrible human being, and she's constantly needling away at Harry and being like, you know, it's something to do with the parents, and, you know, he's a horrible, scruffy little child, and you should never have taken him in, and blah, 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 and just absolutely vile human being. So, of course, Harry loses his temper, and when Harry loses his temper, things happen. In this case, Aunt Marge gets blown up to the size of like a balloon. Now, in the film, she sort of like goes out into the garden and then out into the wide world, and then gets captured and like deflated, basically. In the book, she kind of stays in the house, but she still gets deflated. But it's still, I mean, how many vile human beings have you wanted to just sort of like blow up like a balloon and just watch them float away into the atmosphere? Kudos to Harry. So anyway, because he does that, he then sort of like packs up his stuff, and he's just like, nope, that's it, I'm gone now. Because, you know, I know that they're going to expel me out of Hogwarts, that's it, I'm done. I don't want anything else to do with you guys. And he leaves. Now, as he leaves, he sort of spots this big black shaggy dog. And as he's trying to get in closer, he kind of gets scared, falls backwards, and he ends up somehow summoning the night bus with Stan Shunpike. So the night bus goes on a little bit longer in the book. You know, you find out a bit more about, you know, the witches and wizards, and it goes sort of all over the place. In the film, it's kind of like as soon as he gets on, the next stop is the Leaky Cauldron. And so he gets off at the Leaky Cauldron, and the Minister of Magic is waiting for him. Now, for Harry, he's absolutely terrified, because the Minister of Magic can obviously expel him, can obviously put him in Azkaban, or, you know, whatever. But in actuality, the Minister of Magic is like, oh my god, Harry, I'm so glad you're safe. Where have you been hiding? Blah, 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 blah. And Harry's like, wait, what? I broke the rules. But yeah, so he kind of gets let off scot-free. Now, a slight difference in the book is Harry has now 2 weeks before the start of school. So he goes around Diagon Alley, and we get a lot of like descriptions about the different shops and things like that, and he's, you know, sat out in the sunshine, and it paints a nice picture. But I understand why they don't really do that. In the film, it's pretty much the same day. The next day, they're kind of going off to Hogwarts. So anyway, so they all get together. Hermione ends up with a nice ginger cat called Crookshanks, who seems to be maliciously like after Scabbers as a rat. Now, obviously, we find out later why. In the book, she actually has Crookshanks has a bit more of a role to play. In the film, not so much. But Crookshanks got his eye on Scabbers. So anyway, in the book, Harry finds out that Sirius Black has escaped Azkaban and is after him from overhearing a conversation between Mr. and Mrs. Weasley. Now, in the film, he gets told by Mr. Weasley, and he's like, please don't go off looking for him. Don't go off into trouble. And obviously, Harry's like, no, why would I do that? And they're literally looking at me like, the last 2 years at Hogwarts? Like, is that nothing to go by? So they end up in both, they end up boarding the Hogwarts Express. You know, they end up in a cabin with Professor Lupin, who's fast asleep, because obviously, you know, it's the only one left. And Harry tells them all about, you know, oh yeah, he's after me, is Sirius Black? And the other two are like, well, then let's not get you in trouble, basically. And then we get the first encounter with the Dementors. Now, it's the same in both. The train stops. Ice sort of like goes across the windows. There's like, sort of like things boarding the train, and this big hooded cloak comes in. And basically sucks everything out of Harry, and Professor Lupin chases them away. Now, the slight difference is in the book, as the Dementors are sort of coming into the cabin, Ginny and Neville have ended up in the cabin as well. So, you know, you've kind of got these two extra characters in the book, but obviously Harry faints because it affects him more, because obviously he's heard the death of his parents, and that, you know, is what he's surviving on, basically. So they arrive at Hogwarts. They find out that Hagrid has been made the new Care of Magical Creatures teacher, which is scary and lovely, because obviously Hagrid's the one that thinks a three-headed dog and a giant spider is nothing to be scared of, and normal human beings are like, that's not that normal, to be fair. Now, there is a lovely scene in the film with Harry in the dorm messing around with, like, and eating magical sweets with all sort of like the other boys in the dorm, like Dean and I've forgotten the other names. Ron and Neville, and there's another one. Seamus, that's it. That's the name. Got it then. And it's sort of like this nice little bit of normality, and everyone kind of like playing around and having magical sweets, and you know, and it's like, I really love that scene, because it's just the perfect kind of, this is what school should be, this is what boarding school should be, and it's not really in the book. So I think, you know, I love that the film added it in. Now, their first lesson in divination is pretty much exactly the same in both. Harry gets the omen of death, which he then finds out is the groom, which is a big black shaggy dog, which he then goes, I've seen that. So he's kind of like, oh no, I'm going to die. But apparently it turns out that, you know, Professor Trelawney predicts the death of a student every single year, and that's kind of how it goes. Anyway, so then in the book, they go to the Transfiguration class, and Professor McGonagall tells them about anime guy, and transforms into a cat in front of them. So she tells them about how, you know, wizards can choose animals to transform into, and vice versa. Now, in the film, we've already seen it, the gang's already seen it, where she transforms into a cat quite a few times. I mean, the famous one is, like, you know, the first lesson, they come running in, they're like, phew, we got away with it, Professor McGonagall's not there, she's a cat, she jumps up, she becomes a human, and Ron goes, oh, that's bloody brilliant, and it's just like, well, we've already seen that, but obviously in the book it's not until third year, so... now we get to Hagrid's first lesson. Now, in the book it's a ton of hippogriffs. In the film it's one, and I can kind of understand, you know, CGI and things like that, so I can understand why one hippogriff is kind of what they were going for. But it plays out with Buckbeak in pretty much the same way. You know, Harry ends up making friends with Buckbeak, and then he ends up flying Buckbeak, and then Malfoy, who doesn't like either Hagrid or Harry, decides to insult Buckbeak and be like, oh, you're not, you know, dangerous, you dirty old animal, even though Hagrid was like, they're really sensitive, you insult them, they'll hurt you. So it hurts Malfoy. So Hagrid then has to run Malfoy off to Madame Pomfrey, and he then hams it up, like, Malfoy I am a Slytherin, and I love Slytherin, but man, Malfoy does this to the dirty. Like, he hams it up. He basically pushes to the point where, as you find out later, Buckbeak is going to be executed because of what he's done. And then we get our first Defence Against the Dark Arts lesson. Now, the difference is, in the film, it's in the classroom. In the book, he tropes them all the way through to the teacher's lounge. But it still goes ahead pretty much the same. You know, like, you know, you find out the boggart will take on your wildest fear. You then say ridiculous. It then becomes something that's a joke to you, and laughter kills a boggart. Then you get the scene sort of like where Harry then sort of steps up, and just before the boggart kind of transforms into what Harry's worst nightmare is, you know, Professor Lupin jumps in front of him, and it turns into sort of like an orb behind some clouds, which we find out later is the moon, because he's a werewolf. But then it's sort of like, yeah, that all kind of plays down exactly the same way. Now, in the book, we're getting more information about classes and activities like Quidditch, and the constant sort of like Crookshanks after Scabbers kind of chronicle throughout the book as well. Now, in both, Harry is unable to go to Hogsmeade because obviously he didn't get the permission slip signed because he blew up Uncle Vernon's sister. So he wanders off and eventually ends up finding Lupin. Now, in the film, he asks Lupin to help him fight off the Dementors. In the book, it's just a little chat. And then later on, after a Quidditch match goes horribly wrong, that's when Harry goes, you need to show me how to fight off Dementors. So we then get to the Gryffindor Tower, and we find the Fat Lady's portrait has been slashed, and she herself is missing. And then we find out that it was Sirius Black trying to get into the dormitory. So this then kind of cements the idea that, oh, Sirius Black is after Harry Potter. That's clearly why he's trying to get in. So all the students end up sleeping in the Great Hall. And then, you know, Harry finds out you know, let him sleep. You know, why would he go off fighting and trying to find Sirius? And it's quite a nice little scene. Now, in the film, things kind of settle back to normal pretty much straight away, but in the book, the teachers start keeping a closer eye on Harry. The fat lady is then replaced by a dim-witted knight who keeps changing the password and trying to, you know, get people to fight him and things like that, so that doesn't go well. But then, so in the film, it's kind of like straight away, it's like, oh, Sirius Black is trying to get in, we can't find him in the castle, everything goes back to normal, we're not that worried anymore. In the book, you've still got that heightened kind of, he's after Harry. Now, Snape then takes over a Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson, and he starts teaching them about werewolves, which is when Hermione kind of figures out that that's who Lupin is. Everybody else is a bit dim-witted as well. I mean, you know, why would they think? Do you know what I mean? So then you've got the Quidditch match. Now, this Quidditch match is the only Quidditch match in the film, which is a little bit of a disappointment. In the book, it's like 1 of 3. So you get it between Hufflepuff and Gryffindor, and it goes pretty much the same way. There is horrific thunderstorm going on. You know, it's getting worse. Harry is then attacked by Dementors. He drops down to the ground. Gryffindor loses. Harry's broomstick then gets destroyed because of the Whomping Willow. And it kind of, you know, and it goes out exactly the same way. Now, in the book, the attack is what prompts Harry to tell Lupin to teach him how to fend off Dementors, basically. So then, with the Christmas trip to Hogsmeade, Harry is bequeathed the Marauders map by Fred and George to make sneaking about easier. So basically, the Marauders map, I solemnly swear I'm up to no good. You say that, and it will show you all the exits and entrances, where all the teachers are, and yeah, it's a really good map. And then you say Mischief Managed, and it will disappear. So then he sneaks into Hogsmeade. Now, in the film, he has his invisibility cloak with him. In the book, he doesn't. So in the book, the gang go into the Free Broomstick and Harry gets shoved under a table when the Minister of Magic and some teachers come in. He then finds out that Sirius is his godfather and betrayed his parents, causing the death and killed Peter Pettigrew. In the film, he hears his name, so he slips under the cloak and follows the Minister into the pub and then finds out the above information and runs off crying. So in the film, it's at the Shrieking Shack that the three have a conversation about what Harry has just heard. And then Harry's now like, well, I'm going to go after Black myself, completely disregarding everything anybody has said to him so far in this book/film. But in the book, it's the next day in the common room, and they go and visit Hagrid for Harry to find out why he was never told. But when he goes to find out why he was never told, he finds out that Buckbeak might be killed due to his behaviour towards Malfoy, so that kind of tempers his anger a bit. Now, in the book, Harry gets a new firebolt broom for Christmas, and Hermione tries to convince him to not ride it, as it's a suspicious gift that he got, and it could be cursed. In the film, it's given to him at the end, and they know who it's from. So due to Hermione telling Professor McGonagall about the broom, Harry gets it removed and until Prophetess can be run on it. So in both, we get Harry learning the Patronus from Lupin to protect him from Dementors. And in the film, Harry gets it pretty much second try. In the book, we get more of an insight over a period of lessons from Lupin, because obviously, realistically, it's like a really complex spell. Obviously, Harry's not going to pick it up straight away, but in the film, I can understand you don't want to see him trying to learn one charm over and over again, so he gets it pretty much straight away. Now, as I said, in the book, we get a lot more effort put towards Quidditch. Harry gets his fireball back from Professor McGonagall, finally, just in time for his next match, and they win. You know, they win the next match. It's fantastic. Now, in both, we get the scene where Scabbers has disappeared with blood on the sheets, and so Ron believes that Crookshanks has killed Scabbers, and this leads to a massive falling out between Hermione and Ron. And then you get Sirius Black getting into the Gryffindor common room and almost getting Ron. Now, in the book, this happens. In the film, it doesn't. So in the book, he gets in, you know, Ron wakes up and there's this Sirius Black like looming over him, and then he runs away because he got a list of passwords from Neville. And so Neville then is completely vilified, won't be given any more passwords, isn't loved by anyone basically. And I feel sorry for Neville, poor little Neville. So, you know, it puts him in disgrace basically. And at this point in the film, Harry is looking at the Marauders map and spots Pettigrew's name. So obviously he goes looking for him, knowing that he is dead. While looking, he encounters Snape and then Lupin. Now letting Lupin know about the name, which confuses Lupin somewhat because he knows him to be dead. So in the book, Ron now isn't talking to Hermione because of the demise of Scabbers, and Hagrid tries to fix it. Hermione also threatens to expose the map to the teachers if Harry goes out to Hogsmeade again. Good old Hermione. You get none of this sort of like fallout in the film. You get a little fallout between Ron and Hermione, but it's not as bad as this. They always seem quite close. But this is then when, Lupin then gets the map from Harry. So basically in both, Lupin realises that actually Harry has the map and he takes the map away because he knows what it is. Now in both, we get Buckbeak that's going to be executed as Hagrid lost his case, which is as Malfoy's getting glory, like he's glorious, he's gloating and everything. It causes Hermione to punch him, which I love. And then we get in the book, we get the Quidditch final and Gryffindor win the Quidditch Cup, which puts everyone on a high and, makes it so lovely and happy. Now, in the book as well, we get all the exams, and then during Harry's divination exam, he gets given the prophecy about a servant of Voldemort's rising up after 12 years and reporting to his master. Now, this prophecy is earlier in the film. Same prophecy, but earlier and on in the film. So in both, they go down to Hagrid's to be with him before Buckbeak is executed, and end up finding Scabbers. So obviously Ron owes Hermione an apology. Now as they leave, they hear Buckbeak being killed, but then Ron, who is chasing after Scabbers, who is trying to escape his grasp, gets attacked and pulled away by a big black dog underneath the Whomping Willow. Now in the book, they also have Crookshanks with them, and Crookshanks presses a knot on the tree that freezes the branches so Hermione and Harry can follow. In the film, they kind of get battered by the branches until they can throw themselves into the hole. Now, in both, they follow the tunnel until they end up at the Shrieking Shack, where it's revealed that the dog is in fact Sirius Black, and he is an animagus. Now, Lupin then joins the fray, and it looks like they're in cahoots to kill Harry. We now also learn that Lupin is a werewolf as well. However, it turns out that Scabbers is Pettigrew, and so the story is finally told. But in between this story, Snape comes and tries to take them away. And obviously Harry wants to know everything about it, so they kind of attack Snape, which is a bit like, I feel sorry for him. He's trying to get the glory, and he hates Sirius and he hates Lupin. Anyway, so they find out that in actuality it was Peter Pettigrew that was the secret keeper that betrayed Lily and James to Voldemort, and Sirius went down for it because he was, James's best friend. So Harry suggests that Peter Pettigrew is taken to the castle, to the Dementors, so that Sirius will finally be free, which will also give Harry the hope that he can live with Sirius, seeing that he is now Harry's legal guardian and godfather. So the whole lot of them exit the Shrieking Shack. Now, as they exit, the moon comes out, which means that Lupin starts to transform. Sirius becomes a dog again to help keep him calm. Pettigrew ends up transforming into a rat again and escaping, and in the ensuing chaos, Sirius becomes a man again, and a whole load of Dementors turn up and try to suck him dry, basically, and try to take his soul. Now in the film, Harry goes to fight for him. In the book, it's Hermione and Harry. However, they almost die as well, but are saved by someone creating a very impressive Patronus charm, which neither can see who it is, but Harry believes it's his dad. So then Harry, Ron and Hermione end up in the hostel wing and trying to convince Dumbledore of Sirius's innocence. So Dumbledore suggests to Hermione that they need more time, and 3 turns should do it. So Hermione uses her time turner that she's been using all year to attend all the classes that she's got, and takes her and Harry back so they can save not just Sirius, but also Buckbeak. Now they rescue Buckbeak, and it turns out that Harry did the Patronus charm, but past Harry thought it might have been his dad, but obviously future Harry knows that it's him. So then they save Sirius. When they see, they then sort of like fly off, release him from the tower, and they let him fly off on Buckbeak. And then, we then see the end of term, and the book ends with Harry getting a letter from Sirius with a signed permission slip and a little owl for Ron. The film ends with Harry receiving his fireball and flying off. So, the plot was very different. Unlike the second book, which was very close, this one had a bit more leeway with its narrative. I was a little gutted that we only saw one Quidditch match in the film, as I would have very much enjoyed seeing more than one. It did keep the bigger points, and in the fact of the twist of who Scabbers is, what he did, in between, everything else, they had to keep that twist really. But both narratives, it did miss quite a lot of the little bits. So the plot gets a 6 out of 10 for me. Now, overall, the setting is, of course, the same. You know, you've got Hogwarts, Hogsmeade, London, Diagon Alley. The characters and what motivates them is kept pretty much the same as well. It was mainly the plot itself that differs so greatly between the two. Therefore, overall, it gets a 7 out of 10 for me. Now, this is my own opinion, of course, and I'm happy to hear if you agree or disagree with anything. Leave it below in the comments. If there's any book to film adaptations you'd like me to do, again, leave it below in the comments. And click subscribe and like as well, so you're alerted whenever a new video comes out. But until then, remember to always keep it contento, and thank you so much for watching.